Hi, my name is Rick, and I'm very grateful recovering alcoholic. It is my pleasure to be able to do this uh, taping of my talk. Um, it'll be short, it won't be long. I don't want to keep people boring. Also, don't want to get into a whole war story. We all have our war stories. We could sit around and top one another with our war stories. I don't want to get into that. I've got a fair amount of recovery, a good amount of recovery. My um, recovery date is October 6, 1966. It is now March 17th, 2020. That means I'm in my 54th year. I actually have 53 years, 53 and a half maybe. Uh, just want to say that didn't just happen like that. It was a whole lot of day at a time, a whole lot of day at a time. And that's the only way it happened. It didn't happen. I didn't come in and say, okay, poof, I want 54 years or 53 years. It took one day at a time. An interesting piece was when I had 50 years, and as I said, my recovery date is October 6th, 1966. So it's in October. Around spring of that year, or my 50th year, I was reflecting on something, and then I remembered, oh my goodness, I told someone in my first year of recovery, I said to them, you know what? If I ever get 50 years, I'm going to go out and celebrate. You know what that did to me? It scared me. I actually was afraid. I got frightened that actually might happen. Because I really think that what you think about, you bring about. And so I call a mentor of mine who I talk with and on a regular basis, and he knows things about me that the world doesn't know. And so I called him and said, you know what? This is what I've been thinking. And so it was a habit I developed early in recovery. I told on myself. And I had to tell on myself because if I didn't tell on myself, I'd be left to my own thinking to figure this whole thing out. And you know what that is? I'm screwed. I do that, I'm screwed. And so I made sure I told somebody, and it was gone. That was just like that. It was gone, and I had a very good 50th year of my recovery. Anyway, I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I was one of three brothers. We lived in the project, and stories like anybody else. You live in the projects. That's a lifestyle, and certainly it's not a lifestyle that has a lot of money, has a lot of food, or has a lot of clothes. It certainly wasn't for me at that time. And so I was in the middle of three. Um, we all slept in the same bed. Um, we were very poor. My father left for the Navy, and he never came back. And so my mother was really, really stressed out. She was a young woman, three little kids, three boys, and just didn't know how to handle all of that. At 7, my godmother came to visit us, and my mother said, "Please, can you take Richard? It's too much for me. All the kids here are too much for me." And so my godmother took me with her. She had moved with her husband up to Connecticut. She had no children, and there I was. And she immediately uh, went to her attorney and filed adoption papers. Filed the adoption papers for me to be adopted, and there it was. I was adopted, and around 12, I had remember it was not a very happy situation. She wanted me as her child, and her husband, um, who refused to talk to me in Spanish, and I blame him for a lot of years for me not knowing Spanish. I'm Puerto Rican, and I and I blamed him a lot of years, but I also was very much into denial. I bought the name Davila. It's really pronounced Davila, but chose to pronounce it Davila. I was in a school where it wasn't popular to be Puerto Rican or black, and so I quickly used Davila as a sounding name for sounding Italian. So there I was. I mean, my whole thing. When I got adopted, I had clean clothes, clean bed sheets, food. I knew my brothers didn't have any of that. So whatever that was, that instilled in me. That's what instilled in me. Um, and so being Puerto Rican wasn't popular. I'll become something else, and that's what I was. I was for all my life. I was always something else. I read a book one time. It was called "The Meaning of Man" by Sidney Poitier, and in his book, he explains one of the teachers that he had in one of the schools in the Bahamas said one day to them, "When you go out of here, don't try to become someone you're not to be better than you were." And it made no sense to me then, but it made sense to me as I got more in my recovery. But that's what I tried to be. I was always trying to be someone I'm not to be better than what I thought I was. And that gets into the term of authenticity. I talk a lot about in my recovery how I learned to become an authentic person. Because even my first few years in recovery, uh, I'd be this here at the meeting, I'd be that there in my house, I'd be something else in my at the store, I'd be something else in my workplace, and I didn't have the authentic consistency of being the same person in all places. Anyway, so at 12, I had my first drink. It was also when I decided to become a juvenile delinquent. It was a conscious choice. I was doing well in school. I was in the sixth grade. And by the time I finished the sixth grade, I stayed back. I went on, they transferred me to a Catholic school, which didn't make much difference, but it got me to the ninth grade. In the ninth grade, I got kicked out of ninth grade, and I ended up in reform school. I got out of reform school, and I ended up in the army. Meanwhile, I got in the army when I was 17. So from 12 to 17, I was a regular drinker. I mean, at 15, I could get served in a bar. That was pretty hard in those days, when the drinking age was 21. But I'd be able to get served in a bar, and I would steal liquor. I would go to the drugstores in Connecticut, sold liquor, and I would. I remember this one special drugstore had it near the front door, so it was easy for me to slip in a half pint, 2 half pints, whatever it was, slip them into my pocket, and go off and drink. So when I was in the army, I ended up being free, drinking, and I did all of that kind of stuff. I got out when I was 19. I was in Germany. I went into the airborne paratroopers. By the way, that was one of the things that I actually completed something. I completed jump school, and I actually had like a certificate of completion of something, and I was very proud of that. But I couldn't not drink. No matter how proud I was of everything, I found a way to get myself in trouble every time I took a drink. Well, when I got out when I was 19, I ended up living in at home for a little while, and then I went to New York, back to New York, and took up life back in New York again. And I did things like sell my blood for $5 just to get me started drinking. Then I found out that in Brooklyn they had a blood bank that actually gave you a shot of Fleischmann's. That's whiskey, and I would walk the length of Manhattan to get down over across the Brooklyn Bridge to Fulton Street and get to that blood bank, give my blood, get my $5, and get a shot of Fleischmann's whiskey. That's how important drinking was to me. It was very, very, very important. It was. There were times in my drinking I'd be so gluttonous I would drink until I would just throw up and then drink some more and drink some more and then pass out, get up and drink some more. Um, it was a very, very important part of my life. I ended up marrying a lady which lasted 6 months. She had 3 kids, and all she did was marry a fourth kid. I'm not going to go into the details of that relationship. Then I ended up living with another lady with 3 kids. We ended up having 2 of our own. And then it was with that lady I came into the program and got sober. It was the last year, that 1966. I had gotten to the point of real insanity. I was very much insane, to the point of where I would hallucinate that people were taking over my body and commanding me to do different things. I went to the psychiatric clinic where my wife was at going, and I met a guy there who said he was in AA for 2 years, and he was only going to the group because he had issues with his wife leaving him and breaking up with him. And then I never went again. But there I was. One day I was hallucinating that someone came into my body and was telling me, commanding me to kill my family. And it was very, very real. And I was really, really very afraid. I was afraid to go to sleep because sometimes, I had that mocha state when you go to sleep where you would, at least for me, I mean, I would get up in the middle of the night and I'd find myself peeing in the corner of the bedroom thinking I was in the bathroom. And I knew that I could end up in that mocha state, and I didn't want to end up killing my family as a result of that. And so I went back to that psychiatric clinic. This was about a year and a half since I met the guy. And I went there, and I went right up to the guy, Al, and I asked him, hey, what's the story with AA? He said he'll have some people call me. So I get a call the next night, and I pick it up, and it said, hello, Rick. And I said, yeah, no, I was Richard at that time. Hello, is Richie? I said, yeah, that's Richie. He said, I understand that you want to go to an AA meeting. And I'm going, oh, crap. The guy really had someone call me. Even though I was asking him to have someone call me, I'm pissed off now because the guy actually had someone call me. And so I said, yeah. And he said, this is Marty. I'll be going to a meeting tonight. You want to come along? And I said, yeah, I guess. Okay. And he said, okay, I'll pick you up at 6 o'clock, 6:30, whatever it was. And then I hung up. And I remembered, Jesus, why the hell did I do that? Why did I commit to that? But anyway, I had one suit that I owned, and I found it, and I took a bath and got dressed up, poured a lot of, at that time they didn't have many colognes around, but I had something called Canoe. I poured that all over me, and I went downstairs, and Marty was way down front. They said, get in the back. And there were like already 3 people in the back. And he had, the front was with his wife and another person in there. And I said, where the hell am I going to fit? So I jumped in, I squeezed in between people. And I know that the ride to the meeting was 45 minutes. And I just know that there had to be a lot of people in that meeting, especially in the car, loaded with, here I am loaded with Canoe all over me that were probably choking up as a result of that. A lot of people lit their cigarettes up, I know. And anyway, I got to the meeting. It was 45 minutes away. I sat in my first meeting. I actually, that at that time the Cold War was pretty strong, and I remember thinking, oh my God, they're trying to drag me to a communist party. That's what this meeting must be about. And the meeting went on, and it ended, and did the usual thing, Our Father on the end of the meeting, and got in the car. We drove back for 45 minutes, had another meeting. So that first night, I learned the lesson. I learned that you can have a meeting on the way to the meeting, you can have a meeting at the meeting, and then you can have a meeting after the meeting. So it was like having three meetings that night. But I don't know what attracted me to it. I just knew that I was walking those dark hallways of insanity, and I didn't want to do that. And so I kept coming to meetings, and I remember seeing the first step, and I knew that's so true. That's so true. My life is unmanageable. I have no control over my drinking, and I was a true alcohol addict. I smoked some dope once in a while, and I took some dexedrine speed for once in a while, but my I'm a true alcohol addict, uh, and um, I was just, and I would do anything, anything to get my drug alcohol, whatever I had to do to get it, I would do it. So I kept coming around, I kept coming and coming and coming, and I started to feel comfortable in the fellowship. Although I was the youngest one in the group at that time. At that time we had a lot of people that were coming off of Skid Row, drug tanks and jails, uh, a lot of different kinds of places like that. I was there sometimes, but I wasn't there all the time. So I could always say that I wasn't as bad as that. But I didn't say that when I was in the program. When I was in the program, I didn't say I was that I wasn't as bad as that. I knew I was bad as that. I knew where I'd been. I knew I'd panhandled in New York City. I knew I'd just sold my blood, not for the good of like, oh, you want some blood? It was like, give me some money so I can get started drinking. Give me my shot of Fleischmann so I can get started drinking again. And so, I never did anything that was, noble or magnanimous or anything like that. Never did anything that would that people could say, "Wow, Rick he's a good guy. He did a nice thing." No, it was always the agenda was always about me and anything that I can do to get it. That was it. And it didn't happen. It didn't change overnight. It didn't change overnight. It took a while in the program for me to get righted again. Don't forget, I started drinking when I was 12 years old. That means when I came into recovery, even at the chronological age of 28, I was still a 12-year-old, emotionally, mentally 12-year-old guy, kid, basically. So I had two good sponsors. I had two guys that loved me. They loved me to death. Uh, Bridgeport, Connecticut is where I got into recovery. It was about 50 miles outside of New York City, and I remember my first month in the program. Bill Wilson was speaking at the convention in in Madison Square Garden, and they wanted to go. Tickets were $50 a piece, and so they wanted me to go, and I said I can't afford the tickets, and they actually bought me a ticket, and we went down to Madison Square Garden, sat on the mezzanine, had dinner. It was a dinner, and then Bill Wilson spoke, and other people spoke, and then they had a receiving line at the end to go up to shake Bill's hand and I actually was in that receiving line. I shook Bill Wilson's hand. Didn't know anything of the impact of what that was. I holy crap! What happened here? My screen went blank. How did that happen? Okay, I had no idea what kind of value that was. I just, oh, Bill Wilson, an old guy telling a story. That's interesting. It was more exciting that I was at Madison Square Garden. I had never been to Madison Square Garden before, and so that impact. And a year later, I went with my buddy Tommy too, and he spoke. There was no receiving line, but I couldn't grasp who this guy was. And it was 30 something years later. I'm in Florida. I moved here, and I was at my Riverview meeting at Joe's Club, and some people were talking about like, yeah, I was at Dr. Bob's house, and this is it. And then some other people say, well, you know what, Dr. Bob, Bill Wilson, you know what they really meant to say? And I'd say, how the hell do you know what the hell they want to say? Were you there? And then a sudden realization came to me, maybe 33 years later. I'm going, holy crap! I shook Bill Wilson's hand, and it was like, wow, and it took 33 years for that to register that I had shook Bill Wilson's hand. And so, I really believe shaking his hand within a month of my recovery or 6 weeks of my recovery, I think there was some mojo in that handshake, because I'll tell you what, some of the things that happened in my recovery, it would be like someone's drinking story. I just made so many mistakes. One of the things, they talk about emotional sobriety. It took me so long to deal with my emotional sobriety. My emotions were just totally out of whack. Just were not, I just couldn't get a grasp on them. They were totally out of whack. And so I went through a lot of emotional pain. But one of the things that happened early in my recovery, I remember, I said, I will not pick up a drink no matter what. At that time, the saying was, are you willing to go to any lengths not to pick up? Are you willing to go to any lengths not to pick up? And I bought that. I bought into that I was willing to go to any lengths not to pick up. And I'll tell you what, that saved my ass so many times. So many times that saved my ass. And eventually I started to grow emotionally. Eventually, I'm talking about years. Okay? And so eventually I started to grow. But the thing that saved my ass was that I'm willing to go to any lengths not to pick up. To this very day, I am willing to go to any lengths not to pick up. So a lot of good things happened in my recovery. I guess I could name them off. And a lot of times when I say it, and I share that in my story, it sounds like I'm bragging, but I'm just amazed that some of these things happen. It's just unbelievable. My wife and I, we have his, hers, and ours. I had those two boys, one of my earlier marriages, and then she had three boys, and then we have two daughters together. So we have his, hers, and ours. We got 17 grandkids. I got 9 great grandkids. I have a couple of people that I consider as mentors, sponsors. I sponsor people. I stay active in the program. Sometimes I'll go to 1 meeting a week, and sometimes I'll go to 5, but I stay active in the program. there was a period of my recovery that I was not. I think there were 2 years I went without meetings, but I was busy working in the field, working with people, and it wasn't until I got back to going to a meeting I realized how empty I was. I had nothing left in me. I was just totally an empty shell. I sat at a meeting after a couple of years that I was not at meetings, didn't pick up. But I was not at meetings. I sat at a meeting and I'm going, oh my God, I got nothing to offer here. I have nothing to share. I have nothing to offer here. I don't even feel like I belong here, but I do. I knew I did, but that feeling came over me. And the way I turned that feeling in, well, I better get my ass back here and start attending some regular meetings and get back in the groove here. And that's what I did. I ended up doing that, and I'm so happy I did that. My attitude, my peacefulness, uh, all stems from going to meetings and being active in the program. Uh, my early days in recovery were based on fellowship. I was very involved in the fellowship. I if you had told me that if you had told me that I better read the big book, I better read those 164 pages by such and such a date, and I need to be on step something by such and such a date, I doubt if I would have made it here. My sponsors were very good. They told me, look, the steps will come. Don't worry about it. Keep coming in. Learn how to build a foundation of recovery, staying away from that first drink, okay, and that other stuff will come. And I with that, and then they would say to me, if you want to know about the steps, go to meetings and see who are applying them in their lives. That's how you're going to learn about the steps. And I did. I learned the steps that way there. I met good people. I saw people doing the deal. People that were doing the deal were people who were like practicing the steps in their life. It's like I remember at a meeting 50 something years ago. I remember Mary Keating. She would be coming in and she would knit and sit there at the meeting and just knit. And she was a very wise woman. And I remember her saying one night, you know, you look at all those slogans on the wall. Easy does it. Think. First things first. But for the grace of God. And on and on. And she'd say, those are good slogans. But if you don't take them off the wall and put them in your life, they don't mean anything. Take them off the wall and put them into your life, then that'll have meaning to you. And it's the same thing as the steps. You can read the steps, you can read all the surrounding narrative around them, but if you don't take them and put them into your life, they have no meaning at all. So you can probably memorize the 12 steps. You probably know every one of them, every word of them. I don't, but you probably could. Some people, I've seen people read the big book and sit at a meeting and quote page 84, paragraph 3, blah 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 blah. You know what? After a while, I don't see those people. I don't see them. They know they memorize some parts of the big book, but I don't see them at a meeting. And so, it's a program to live by, not a program to internalize, not a program to be able to memorize and to be able to quote, unquote, and all that kind of stuff. What's more important is that you internalize what those things mean, and that's the way I operate my program. I operate my program, living my program. I've learned over the years to something I call live your life, not your story. I'm a person that lives my life, not my story. My story is real. It existed. It's never going to change. It's the story. But I don't have to live it now. I don't have to internalize that stuff. I bring consciousness into the moment, and by bringing consciousness into the moment, when a thought from my history and my past starts invading my current life, my present state, and starts coming in, I go, "Oh, thanks for sharing. Goodbye," and then I move on. Because you could be for a long time, for years, I was that effect of my history. I was a victim. I could tell you how much I was victimized, and I could tell you how much I was wronged, and how difficult my childhood was, and how this and this is, and I'd be ready to tell you that in a drop of a hat. I could tell you right there, right in a minute. And you know what? I don't even deal with any of that stuff. My I mean, you know, my mother and father, whatever they did, and they were doing the best they can with what they had at that time. Just like I'm doing the best I can with what I have as a parent, as a grandparent, as a great grandparent. I'm doing the best that I can with what I have, and I'm trying to do the right thing at this time. And so, my life, it's a different life. I was a ninth grade dropout, and since I got in the program, I was able to acquire my GED when I was around 31, 32. And then I started a bachelor's degree, and I was able to graduate somewhere around when I was 37 to 38. Went into a master's program. I graduated somewhere around 42 years old. And at 51 years old, I received my doctorate degree. And I was in academia at the time, and I wanted to stay there, so I had to look at going for a doctorate degree. And so I was a professor for 33 and a half years. I've been active in the field of addiction for, let's see, I've got 53 years now. I guess for 50 years, 49, 50 years, I've been active in the field of addiction. Even when I was in academia, I was developing curriculum to train people to be alcohol and drug counselors. And so, I'm thinking like, wow, how the heck does that happen? From a real, I mean, I was a dope fiend, alcohol addict, totally untrustworthy, uh, totally not caring about a single individual except me and me and me and me. And to a person that has helped, I figure I've helped hundreds, thousands of people in a lot of different ways. And because I was blessed to do that. And, I just think the transformation that happens with recovery is just phenomenal. And you can't change that. So, believe me, when I tell you my name is Rick and I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic, I am. Thank you.